Hey y'all. So a couple of weeks ago, for my very first video that I made specifically for this channel, I did a review for this documentary called 3 Years in Pakistan, the Erik Audé Story. If you haven't seen that review, then go ahead and check that out. And if you do have the chance to watch the documentary, then make sure you do that as well, because it's really good. But even if you aren't into documentaries, the story itself will pull you in. Now, from that review, I had the opportunity to sit down with the director, Jamielyn Lippman, over Skype and ask her a few questions. So that is what this video is today, an interview with director Jamielyn Lippman where she talks about her documentary 3 Years in Pakistan, the Erik Audé Story. Enjoy. So, going ahead and getting right into these questions that I have planned for you today. So first things first, if you could just go ahead and, if you could describe what it is that this documentary 3 Years in Pakistan, the Erik Audé Story is about.
So 3 Years in Pakistan, the Erik Audé Story is a documentary about a real-life person who at the time in 2001, he was 21 years old, and he was sent to death row in Pakistan for a crime he didn't commit. Mm-hmm. And it's the story of his journey of his perseverance and his integrity and how he fought to survive in a foreign country in a prison. And he was actually proven innocent. And he was offered to leave within 4 months if he pled guilty. And he said, I'm not pleading guilty for a crime I didn't commit. And so they sentenced him to 7 years, and he got out in 3 due to the stroke of God and luck and, a casting director and his mom and the former governor of New Mexico, Bill Richardson. So it's really a one-man story. It's his whole life story before, during, and after, and how one can overcome such adversity and take that experience and not be broken by it, but turn it in to come back and make a good life for himself and use it to fuel his appreciation for life.
Yeah. Okay, and so you serve as director of the documentary. How did you get pulled into this project? Was it, you had heard this story and you said, oh, I have to turn this into a documentary? Or did someone come to you and say, we're already trying to make this a documentary and we're looking for a director? Or were you just looking for a story and then this just fell into your lap? Like, how did you become involved in this project?
So I've known Erik since he was 17 years old,
Wow.
a long time ago, back in the 90s. I used to be an actor, and we had the same agent, and we became really good friends. And so I knew him before this happened, during, and obviously after.
Wow.
And the way that I had found out about it was by opening up the LA Times. And the article that says Actor's Fate in Pakistan is actually the article that I saved from when I read it in the paper. And I'm going, oh my gosh, that's my friend Erik. And after he got back, I got in touch with him about a year and a half later. I was making a documentary about actors. When I met with him, I hadn't seen him in years, and he told me a lot of stories about what happened to him over there. And it was, as you've seen in the film, heartbreaking, shocking, jaw-dropping. Just my heart hurt that, someone could go through this. And I kept thinking to myself, this is its own film. Like, this needs to be its own thing. Mm-hmm. But that was... 14 years ago, before documentaries were what they are now. So I always kind of put it in my back pocket, and I knew I couldn't use elements of the story in the actor's documentary because it wouldn't work. So cut to 2016, I was just finishing with my last film, When the Bell Breaks, which came out last year, and about to, get ready to kind of launch and put that out, and thinking about what I'm going to do next. And I was watching Jim the James Foley story on HBO in February I believe it was February 6, 2016. And I said to myself, I'm going to tell Erik's story. I was so affected and moved by that film. And I immediately reached out to him on Facebook, and we're still friends, but I hadn't talked to him in a couple of years, and said, look, I want to meet with you. I want to make a documentary about not only the story of what happened to you, but your whole life. And I think what was important to me was giving him a chance to tell his story in his own words. And so, yeah, right from that meeting, he said, okay, let's do it. And so we set forth and started the documentary. And then simultaneously, we developed, he wrote a book. He also wrote a script. So while making the documentary over the course of 2 years, with a writer, Michael Green, we collaborated and we developed a full feature for the feature version of the story as well, which focuses more on the prison life.
Okay. And so I know that you said that, making sure that you tell it in his, that one of the things that you focus on is making sure that you tell the story in his own words. Would you say that going into the project that was your main goal, or was there something else that you thought was really important to convey to the audience?
I mean, I think he's just such a selfless and such an inspiration, and I'm so inspired by what he went through, because most people would be so broken, and instead of he took that and he fueled that. And not only what he's made of his life, but his outlook on life is always very inspiring to me. Like, if I'm ever complaining about something or having a bad day, he's like, it could always be worse. It could always be worse. Yeah. And I think the strength of one's mind and the fact that he can endure what he did, I always just found it to be incredibly inspirational. I also knew I hadn't watched the episode of Locked Up Abroad until actually far into making this film. But what I had known about it was, and then when I saw it myself, and I think they did a great job, but what I felt like it lacked is you didn't get to know the person. You didn't get to know Erik. And they kind of crammed in this one interview in, 45 to 48 minutes. And it was kind of all the glory. And the other thing about Erik is that I felt even in that show, he kind of deflected a lot of pain with humor. And with me, because I've known him so well for so long, he knows my intentions. He was able to be himself and very real and very raw and very vulnerable. And I think that really comes through. And, he got a lot of blowback from people that he got a lot of fans from Locked Up Abroad, but he also got a lot of people that, question his innocence. And of course, you were doing a lot of haters on the internet. And I thought, you know what, I was so, this story became just personally moving and affecting to me in so many ways. But I thought, let's do it, but let's get to know the whole you, not just the goal of what happened, whichever, all the stuff that's people want to see, but like, what was it like before you went over there, and what was it like after, and also the accomplishments, and really highlight and celebrate that. So, there was a lot of things that were important, but one thing that in all my subjects and all my films is I have a lot of integrity, and my goal is to speak the truth and let them speak the truth in their own words, and nothing about it be propaganda. And, that was important to give him this film to be able to tell the whole story. How it happened.
Wow, that's great. That's great. So was there any challenges for you as a director on this documentary that, you had to overcome?
I mean, there's always challenges. One, you're dealing with real people, and you're dealing with emotions and family members, and, you're having people relive their pain. And I know why I'm doing it, and my intentions are good for doing it, and they all understand that. But that's, I think, the hardest part of the job is you're having someone relive the hardest parts of their life. And especially when it comes to the torture stuff, like when we got onto that set at the Firestone Tire Plant, and Kendra, my production designer, she built some of those torture devices, like the water device herself. And Erik came on to set as a stunt coordinator and an advisor to the actor, and he's also an executive producer of the film. And when he's looking at this, saying, this is exactly what it looked like, and you can see, bloodshot eyes. And when the actor, Mark Hapka, is asking him advice on something, and, he's saying how he's feeling at that moment. Like, for me, there's an element as a filmmaker who's like, I've constructed every single one of these shots. I've hired a crew. I know exactly how I'm going to, I plan this out to a T of how I'm going to look. And that part as a filmmaker, I love composing shots and directing actors. So I get very excited about that, but never losing sight that, like, this is a real person. And this is not only a real person, this is my friend. And they went through this in real life. So that's always a big challenge. The other challenge is always money, because it's a low budget documentary and there's never enough of it, and you've got to make everything stretch. So yeah, those would probably be the two biggest challenges.
Okay. And so this is not your first documentary, right? You've done two other ones already, one dating back to 2010 and then one from a year ago in 2017. But besides that, and you've already kind of touched on this a little bit, right? You've been in the business for a lot longer than that. Right, you've been an actor for 20 plus years now.
I stopped acting a long time ago, like 10 years ago. But and then I directed a feature, a thriller for Michael Biehn and Jennifer Blanc's company called Killer Weekend that we're on post-production and on as well. And just a lot of other stuff that I'm developing.
Okay, and so what made you want to make that switch from being in front of the camera to behind the camera?
When I was a kid, when I was 7 years old, my dad took us to the movies every Tuesday, and we saw whatever he was seeing. We didn't see, any age appropriate films. And it was the world that I got so lost in. It was the only language I ever spoke. And then my brother started introducing me to foreign films. And then, cut to senior in high school, I just cut class most every day because I was 18 in high school, so I could write my own notes. And I would go to school for the classes I wanted, and then I would go to the movies. I mean, every single day. And that's all I do at night. And it's still kind of all I do. It's pretty much what I do. So for me, when I started acting in high school, and it was something that I loved doing, but when I was on set, I was always hanging out with crew people and looking behind the camera and reading biographies on Kubrick and directors, and studying films and learning how to write. And then I went to film school in 2001. So it was a very natural transition. I think that, with acting, you can't really control it. And it's something that I didn't want to let go of, something that you haven't completely succeeded at. But stepping over was something that I was still studying on a daily basis. So it was very natural transition. Okay. One I would never look back on.
Okay, and so one of the things that I mentioned in my review is that, the story all on its own is just so wild and so captivating, right? That if you were to find yourself just, sitting on a bench at the bus stop, and you just so happen to find yourself sitting next to Erik, and he started recounting all these events that happened to him, Forrest Gump style, that you would miss all of your buses, right? Because you would just be so into it. And so, of course, that makes great fodder for Hollywood, right? It's a Hollywood movie through and through. And so I believe that you touched on this a little bit, that you were that you're already trying to make this into like a feature-length film.
Yeah, so we've developed it as a feature, which focuses more on the prison life. It's still his whole story, but a lot of the relationships and a lot of things that we couldn't include in the film that happened in the prison. And there's a lot of heart in that. As hard as it is what he went through. He, like he says in the film, he came in swinging, and he came out and they were praying for him. He made a life for himself. So the feature to me is kind of like a Shawshank Redemption meets Midnight Express, except he's innocent. And so we have a complete finished package of the pitch deck and who we want to play and, all the roles and whatnot. So that's what we've been, so from the launch of this film, we've had interest and just started sending that out.
Okay. And so, seeing as though, like, this is something that you are doing, right? And you've already turned into a documentary. If you had to choose either one, telling the story through a documentary lens or through the feature-length film lens, which one would you choose? Even though they are kind of like you're focusing on different things. If you had to choose, which one would you choose?
I mean, I think the documentary is important because it's Erik, and he gets to tell his story, and it's something that he's gained a lot of respect and a lot of people coming out and grown men, and he's really quite inspiring and captivating. And so I would choose that for him. I think the one thing that, like, I look at stories when I'm looking at what to develop, a lot of things I want to do is both. Because I get drawn to true life stories. So a lot of these I can do as both a documentary and a feature. And what better way when you're making a documentary, which is far less expensive to make. I mean, that's the thing. I would have loved to do more of those reenactments in the film, but like we couldn't afford it. Like we were able to do one, and I put so much of the budget, like, all right, this is, gotta work. But it's a way, it's a less expensive way to do it. And then in addition to that, when you're actually making a documentary and you have the real subject, you're spending hours on end interviewing him. So I was able to get all the direct answers for the feature. So when it came to that script of taking that 400-page novel and the script and then sitting with Erik for 10 hours in a day, I could come back to the writer and go, no, actually, this is what he said. This is how it happened. And then you're able to add more of the heart and the human that is him that's becoming, a character that you're writing in a screenplay.
Okay, and so quickly going back to the reenactments thing, because that was one of the things that I had mentioned in my review, that I was a bit disappointed that we didn't get more, but I had figured that more than likely it probably had to do something with resources. So I don't know, that kind of makes me feel a bit better that like you would maybe wanted to do more, but life had other plans. So
yeah, I mean, we made this for $175,000, and that's including delivery, PR, marketing, I mean, everything. That's like start to finish. And that only goes so far. Mm-hmm. So it was like, what was the most important to me was always to play the 3-day torture scene out like that, because I wanted the audience to actually see what he went through instead of just hear about it. Yeah. And he lived that exact thing that you see that's, you know, kind of spread over time in that 12 minutes. He repeated that for 3 days straight. And so that was where the focus was, like, whatever else we can get on the set for the 2 days that we're filming. Mm-hmm. But this is it. We don't have any more money to do anymore. Yeah. Somebody said to me, they said, oh, it would have been great if you, like, I love the film, but you know what would be so cool is if you were able to reenact, you know, the fights in the prison. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I would need so much more money for that. I would have loved to.
I get it. So, quickly turning my attention back to the feature-length film, though. So, okay, so you are trying to turn this into a feature-length film, looking at all of the leading actors in Hollywood and things like that. In a perfect world, if you had to choose someone to play Erik, besides Erik, right? Because I understand that not only is he a stuntman, he's an actor, so who better to play you than you? But besides Erik, if you had to choose, who would you love to see play Erik?
Well, if I had it my way, then Mark Hapka, because he was terrific playing him. He's such a fantastic actor. But if we're looking in the world to pre-sale and that sort of thing, who we have on there is Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Channing Tatum is one of my top picks. Okay. Who else? I don't know why I'm drawing a blank right now. Yeah, I would say that he's a big one. Ryan Reynolds, we're looking at.
What about Jason Statham?
Aaron Paul.
Okay. What about Jason Statham? I was thinking if anything like the physical, like, because he's always playing in action movies and things like that, so maybe that would have been an advantage.
I think he's just a little too old. You know what I mean? Okay, like, we're going back to Erik at 21, so that's kind of the challenging part with any of these guys. Mm-hmm. Not that they all don't look great and young. Like, I think Channing Tatum really captures the humor, I mean, everything about Erik. I really feel like would be the perfect fit. So I guess we'll see what happens.
I can see that. So one of the big themes to this movie is the idea of strength, right? And, well, documentary, I should say. And so one of the things that I picked up on with this documentary is that you were redefining the idea of strength, right? And how oftentimes, you know, I think people tend to think of strength as being a physical thing, or, you know, it's muscles and lifting weights and all that kind of stuff, when in reality, there's so much more to it. So I was wondering if you could just go ahead and provide me with your own definition of strength.
I mean, I think what I learned a lot, too, from making this film is, you know, Erik is very physically fit. He's a very strong person. So in one's mind, and maybe watching something like Locks Up Abroad, you feel like he made it through and survived because he could fight off all these people, because he was physically able to. But it's taken on a new meaning because it's completely, you know, inner strength, mental strength, the strength that he could keep his mind clear and see that there was a light at the end of the tunnel when, you know, he could have been killed while he was there. Okay. So that's what it means to me. Is just really that inner strength.
Okay, and so something else that I mentioned in my review is that I love a good documentary. You know, if I'm ever with someone and they say, I just watched this documentary and it was really good, 9.5 times out of 10, I'm like, go ahead and put it on right here, right now. And so for me, one of the things that I feel like makes a great documentary is really getting to the heart and or essence of a person or their story. So seeing as though, you know, documentaries are a huge passion of yours and this is your third one thus far, what is it that makes a great documentary for you?
I mean, I think that's what it is. It's connecting to the characters, like seeing real people be vulnerable and lay their hearts out on the line for the world to see. I think there's a lot, you know, you can go so many different ways, and that's all a matter of opinion, the way you're structuring your documentary. And I like so many different formats, you know. There's ones where it's just all talking heads, and if the story and the people are interesting enough. I tend to like diversion. Like, I don't necessarily want to, even no matter how captivating, I'm not as, you know, for watching talking heads, like whether it's just through media or tons of photos, like I think it's important for your eyes to divert. And I like B storylines and C storylines, even if they're not as strong. I do like, which is a style that's in mine that I like in a lot of films, is where I that kind of peek behind the curtain, the kind of seeing it unfold as it's being made, because a lot of what happens as you're making it. That's why it also, you know, a lot of them take so long. Like, I knew this story inside and out, so I knew all the players, I knew what I wanted to go out and get, but still a lot of it, you know, unfolded as we were making it, or things fall through, or 8 months later, then you get an interview that you weren't going to be able to get, you know? And with us, like, my goal was always to get Ray at the end and interview Ray, which is like, it's the payoff for that storyline, but that didn't happen. Like, you can't go back and go, okay, well, what am I going to do? Let me just go scrap it all and reshoot it all, you know? In a sense, I'm glad that I didn't get to see him face to face, because this isn't about him. And I don't need his excuse or reasons. This is Erik's story and Erik's film. So it worked out the way that it was supposed to. But yeah, but back to your, you know, original question, I think for me, it's connecting to the people. And, you know, it's the people that are telling the story that is what I connect with the most.
Okay.
Or learning something new, or being inspired.
Okay, got it. And so at the very end of the documentary, you had everyone involved describe Erik in one word. And so you go back with Erik a while. All right, and so I thought that I would go ahead and flip the script on you and ask you to describe Erik in one word.
Oh, gosh, there's so many that come to mind. I would say I had to pick one. I would say integrity.
Integrity. Why integrity?
Because he has so much of it, you know, in every way, for people, for himself. I mean, it's so hard, like, for me, because there's so many words that, you know, I could use to describe him. But yeah, strength, integrity. He's just one of the most amazing, inspiring. That would be the best thing I would say. That's probably what I would pick. Inspiring, because he's definitely inspired me.
Okay, I like that. So, last question for you today: why do you think that people will gravitate toward this particular story?
I think for lots of reasons. I think that there's people that are really into, like, you know, like, action and torture and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of audiences, and there's people that would want to see it just because of the fact that you can't make this stuff up. Like, the fact that this stuff happens, the fact that, like, he learned to play poker in prison on death row, and now he's a professional poker player, how he got in and how he got out. But I think that, you know, I think that people would want to see this film because it's just really an inspiring story, and this really can happen to anyone. I mean, this just shows you that an everyday, good, kind-hearted, law-abiding American, you know, he was young, you know, but he did all the research. He did his due diligence. He talked to the FBI. Like, he didn't think he was doing anything wrong. And look at what happened. I mean, he ended up for 3 years in a Pakistani prison on death row. So I think that, yeah, I think you learn when you see it who this man is and how inspirational he is. But truthfully, the other element is it's so educational, because this literally could happen to you or anyone else you know, which is very scary.
Yeah, very. All right, well, that is all the questions that I had planned for you today. If you could just go ahead and tell the people where it is that they could find the documentary if they did want to watch it, or where it is that they could find you if they want to keep up with you on your future endeavors, and honestly anything else that you feel the need to plug right here, right now.
Okay, well, we were at Lemley's in North Hollywood for a week, but we just closed there, so now it's on iTunes, Amazon Prime. The film is 3 Years in Pakistan, the Erik Audé story, and it's on iTunes, Amazon Prime, And then it's VOD everywhere. So if you look, go to our Facebook, which is 3 Years in Pakistan, the Erik Audé story. And it's, from cable to DirecTV to, there's like 30 platforms it's on. For me, I'm big on Instagram. So it's Jamielyn Lippman, one word. And on Twitter, it's 3YP Erik Audé, or 3YP Doc Erik Audé. But yeah, go to the Facebook page and you can get all the information, and we post all kinds of stuff about the film. So,
all right. Well, thank you again, Jamielyn, for doing this interview with me. I really appreciate it. And thank you for making such a great documentary.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. It was nice to meet you,
You too.
as well.
You too.
Okay, have a great day.
All right,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.